The Minister of Home Affairs has resolved to grant exemption permits to 178,000 Zimbabweans and more than 54,000 Lesotho nationals. Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi says this cohort is entitled to apply for new permits under certain terms and conditions. Well, for reaction on this resolution, we're joined by Muchengeti Hwacha, an Executive Director at Asylum, Refugee and Migrant Coalition. Muchengeti, appreciate your time this evening. Now, let's go back a few years and talk about why Cabinet decided not to extend the Zimbabwean permits, ZEPs, leading to the termination announcement by the Home Affairs Minister in the first instance.
It's a very good question, I think, Hugo. We don't quite have the full explanation as to why Cabinet resolved to terminate the permits. But what we gather from the Minister of Home Affairs is they always intended on ending the ZEP program. And so it just became time in their perspective to terminate the program. And that's all we really have from the Minister as to the impetus for terminating the ZEP program at this time.
Now, you have 178,000 Zimbabweans, presumably the bulk of whom you cater to, and obviously the 54,000 Lesotho nationals who now have the opportunity to renew these permits for another, call it 24 months, if you will. So it obviously makes a huge difference to these individuals. But the issue I'd like us to tackle is the confusion around those that didn't apply for waivers. For instance, I think there are waivers somewhere in that whole complex story that should have been applied for. Many were scared. Many thought that there was no opportunity because the minister at the very fore was totally against this. How are you managing the process of these 178,000 and 54,000 Lesotho nationals?
I think the people who've applied for the waivers are mainly the ZEP permit holders because, of course, their permit was coming to an end sooner than the Lesotho nationals. And it's not clear from the minister's statements and the statements from the Department of Home Affairs what the status of people who've applied for waivers is going to be, because you're going to have a cohort who have applied for waivers, which include some concessions to not have to apply to the Immigration Department to migrate from ZEP permits to other permits, and then you're going to have a cohort who don't have have not applied and probably will not get those waivers. So there isn't clarity, and I think the community of ZEP holders is holding their breath, waiting to hear from the minister how he's going to deal with these people. As you know, the impact on their lives is quite impactful, quite tremendous, and they need to make decisions about their futures.
Now, there were challenges that the Zimbabwean exemption permit holders faced after the termination announcement, right? Now, how did the minister address these issues? I suppose the first part of the question, and there clearly seems to be, from what you're saying, absence of information, which continually leads to some confusion. So none of this appears to be clear cut. Is that your perspective?
Yes, even the manner in which the announcement came and the directives were issued by the Department of Home Affairs was a little bit chaotic. And it led to situations where people's bank accounts were closed and their employment was under threat. Luckily, and to his credit, the minister did issue directives that during the time of this extension, the banks and employers should treat ZEP holders as if they are legal and valid and everything is in order and they're documented. So we can give him credit on that, but the manner in which this has gone about is, quite shambolic, especially for people who have to plan their lives for children, for employment, etc. So I think as the Asylum Seeker, Refugee and Migrant Coalition, what we're really asking for is a dialogue, more especially with civil society organizations that engage with these people and engage with the department. And let's come up with a smooth road that gives these people some sort of resolution.
Well, it brings me to the point, who might have touched on this a little bit earlier, or should have, is that you're direct to the Asylum Seeker, Refugee and Migrant Coalition. So let's talk about who you represent.
Our organization is made up of people who are in the legal profession, so various levels, all the way from the bottom, all the way to advocates, attorneys. And so what we try and do is assist mainly with engagement, sort of community engagement. We try and do advocacy, like we're doing now, and we try and do litigation. Those are the three arms that we tackle and try and represent the interests of asylum seekers, refugees, and migrants as best we can.
Now obviously, a lot of the refugees and migrants would potentially feel that they've been under the cop, and as far as their rights are concerned and infringed upon. If we go back to that disastrous fire in Johannesburg a few months ago, in which 77 people lost their lives, many of those individuals who survived, let's talk about the survivors, were foreign nationals. They were migrants of sorts. And when the South African government came out and said, well, come out to us, we're prepared to assist you, and there was no threat to be sent home or threat to be arrested, people didn't come out because there's a lot of mistrust. How do you contend with that?
I suspect there's a lot of anxiety among the migrant community in South Africa about the manner in which the state addresses them and the manner in which they are handled. Right now the inquiry into the fire has been marred by a little bit of scandal that one of the commissioners has been alleged to be have made certain xenophobic statements on his Twitter profile, and they sort of endorsed xenophobic sentiment through that platform. So there is some weariness among the migrant community, and I think some of it justified. But I think it's important for the state to liaise with organizations like SIRI, like ourselves, to be the bridge between the state and these individuals, and so we can engender some kind of trust between these two divergent groups.
Now, let's talk about organizations such as the Helen Suzman Foundation, who've been at the forefront of advocating for the rights of the Zimbabwe exemption permit holders. Now, there's a 2-year hiatus that's been proffered, if you will. Now, I don't anticipate that during those 2 years the minister and his team are going to be sitting and unfolding their arms. There's obviously a lot of work that must be going on behind closed doors to ensure that come the end of that 2-year period, they don't have egg on their face again and faced with a situation where the permits have to be further extended. What work would you be doing to ensure that there is some form of permanence to these permits?
So you rightfully say, I suspect there will be a lot of work in the background. The Helen Suzman Foundation's court challenge is still ongoing. It's been appealed by the minister to the Supreme Court. So there's still no resolution on the legal process on that end. You'd also know that the minister has published a white paper for public comment. The Asylum Seeker, Refugee, and Migrant Coalition is working on putting comments towards the department and give our input from our community. I think also there is an issue about the manner in which the minister has sort of again terminated these permits. The court in the High Court said that the minister didn't act in a procedural manner by not giving these people an adequate opportunity to make representations. Now, from our perspective, the minister has gone and done that again. He has said that we're still terminating these permits, and he's not given the community adequate opportunity to make representation. So the issue that you raise of them having egg on their faces may arise again. We are not sure why the minister doesn't want to engage in a productive manner with the community and civil society organizations, and we come up with a smooth transition that finds a humanitarian resolution for these affected individuals.
So, Muchengeti, we've got 178,000 or so of these individuals that are registered with their permits. We know what their status is. They've been given leave to stay for another 2 years. So let's talk about their offspring. Any children that were born to the 178,000, either prior to this period or over the next 2 years. What is the status of of those children?
Some of those children are actually on ZEP permits themselves. Some of them are on relatives permits on the strength of a parent who's on a ZEP permit. But again, there is uncertainty with respect to those children in the sense that if you are in a grade where you haven't finished school or you're not going to attain majority, what happens in the 2 years? Obviously, you may have to follow your parents back home to Zimbabwe. Then another issue that I've highlighted in the Daily Maverick article that I published yesterday is that one of the conditions that the minister has given for the extension of the permits is that ZEP holders can only change status, that is move from a ZEP onto another permit, for example, like a critical skills, if they leave the country and apply from Zimbabwe. Now that brings the real risk of separating families, separating spouses, separating parents from children, because you force these ZEP holders into a position where they have to return in order to migrate onto other permits, despite the minister's encouragement for them to do so for the last a year or so since he announced the termination initially.
Now, there's something that's come out in the last few days in which a judgment was passed, and I think it was based on a similar situation where it speaks to individuals that have partners that are married to South African citizens, and I think Justice Raymond Zondo announced its judgment, and that they would have leave of stay post the termination of that relationship. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but I was just hoping that you'd be able to comment on it, because I think to a very large extent it does impact some of these Zimbabwe exemption permit holders, and that many of them might have come in on the Zimbabwe exemption permit and then married a South African citizen.
Yes, indeed. That judgment, I am familiar with it. It speaks to a different issue slightly, in the sense that where a spousal relationship has terminated, but they are still minor children who need to be supported by, call it the migrant parent. That migrant parent must have some accommodation within the immigration regime, because their presence in the Republic allows them to fulfill their duty of support to the minor child who will be in the country. So the issue was really decided around that migrant parents should not be forced to leave the country where they have a duty of support that they need to fulfill to a minor child in the country. Of course, we want less children dependent on the state for their livelihood and upbringing. So that was the crux of that judgment. And it just affirmed again that in South Africa and in South African law that we have a high premium on the right to family life. We take that very seriously, as we should.
One of the things that I find interesting, if you will, is around these permit holders and the work that is being done by, or lack thereof, by the Zimbabwean government in order to keep them in South Africa. Are there any conversations going on behind closed doors, to your understanding? The Zimbabwean government obviously has not commented. In fact, their position in the one conversation I had was that South Africa is obviously an autonomous country that makes and lives by its own laws and rules, and as a friend of South Africa, they will abide by any decisions. But are there diplomatic conversations that would have gone on the sidelines to encourage the extension of these permits?
We can only hope that the two countries are talking to each other through diplomatic channels or otherwise. The last information that I have was that the Zimbabwean state had undertaken to welcome any Zimbabwean exemption permit holders who return. And as I understand it, some accommodations were made for them in terms of returning with assets, etc. But otherwise, there hasn't really been anything that I'm aware of that has come from the Zimbabwean government regarding the fate of Zimbabwean exemption permit holders. So I think you're also hitting the nail on the head there, that it would be great if there's some engagement with the Zimbabwean government as to what their views are, what level of assistance they are willing to provide, and more clarity on that for this group of individuals. I think it also touches on the point of the manner in which when there was the termination of the Angolan permits for the refugees from Angola who were residing in South Africa, it was quite a robust dialogue with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, as well as the Angolan government, in the manner in which these vulnerable people would be treated at the conclusion of their refugee protection. So I think a similar type of engagement is needed with the Zimbabwean government and institutions like the High Commission for Refugees.
Now, there's something that's often bandied around, and that's that these individuals are taking the jobs of South Africans, right? So let's unpack this, right? We have 178,000 of these individuals, many of whom have been here for in excess of 10 years, or close on that sort of period, right? So how much of it actually holds true? Because they've been in the system for 10 years, right? Are they a distraction, or have they comfortably fitted in and should be allowed to apply for permanent residency? I mean, are they causing as much disruption as is suggested?
I mean, I challenge the people who take that view to present real, tangible evidence of that, because the majority of the studies that I've read and I think are widely available from the World Bank and other sources are that the presence of migrants in South Africa in general is a net positive. So it's difficult to sustain an argument with evidence that the presence of these 178,000 ZEP holders and other migrants is somehow taking away from this economy in terms of employment or otherwise. I think also, as you spoke to the integration of these people, they've been here for such a long time. And you rightfully say they've been integrated into the economy of South Africa. They are business owners, they are students, they are employees, and have been contributing to the economy, the tax base. And I think on that basis, they deserve some sort of accommodation that allows them to stay in the country on a permanent basis.
Muchengeti, have you or anybody in your circle or in your coalition quantified the financial contribution of these individuals to the economy of South Africa? Because I'd like to think that has got to be a key consideration when you put across an argument. That is not about 178,000 individuals just taking or siphoning from the South African economy, but there's also a contrary factor, which is them giving back. As you rightfully say, many are business owners, many own homes or are paying mortgages or paying rentals and so on.
We haven't quantified the impact of these 178 people, but if you look at research from the World Bank, it speaks to migrants in general in South Africa and what is their overall impact to the economy. And I think that's a very good source. Their methodology in conducting their research, I think, is sound. And I think those are the people we should be listening to, the people who are experts in the field of economics, and not rely on rhetoric which is not substantiated by any evidence.
Now, finally, before we let you go, in the absence of a further extension for these permit holders, come the end of that 2-year period, what are the likely challenges that many of these will face if they were forced to return to Zimbabwe?
Well, as you may know, Hugo, the political and economic situation in Zimbabwe is not too far removed from the situation that brought these ZEP holders to South Africa in the first place. And that means that if they are forced to leave, they find themselves in very difficult circumstances in terms of finding jobs, reintegrating themselves into Zimbabwean society. Again, maybe to just contrast the situation of the termination of the refugee protection for the Angolans, the UNHCR stepped in there and provided reintegration assistance to those who decided to return to Angola. So this is the type of solution that we would like to see happen for the ZEP holders who would like to return, or if they're all forced to return at the end of the 2-year period. This is the type of assistance that we need to see in order to reintegrate them into Zimbabwean society.
And the social challenges that young children would face. So you're born in South Africa, and then all of a sudden you are supplanted in Zimbabwe as a 14-year-old or as an 18-year-old, depending on whatever age you are at the time. What are some of the challenges that they're likely to face? And I'd imagine that there would be psychosocial challenges as well.
Definitely. Some of the children have been born here and have really known no other home. You may find them struggle to even speak some of the local languages in Zimbabwe, but may be fluent in the South African languages. So these are the type of difficulties that we encounter, and it's the reason why the position of the Asylum Seeker, Refugee and Migrant Coalition is that there has to be a transition towards some accommodation for permanent residency. These are our people; they are part of our community. I think it's time that we recognize that.
Muchengeti, lovely speaking to you. Thanks so much for chatting to us on In Focus. Asylum Seeker, Refugee and Migrant Coalition Executive Director, Muchengeti Hwacha.